This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. And for our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. In this episode of The Biggest Table, my conversation is with Reverend Nancy Neal, Minister for Spiritual Formation and Wellness at Bread for the World. We discuss Nancy's role in fostering a culture of prayer, worship, and racial equity within the organization, as well as her journey from waiting tables to advocating for social justice. Nancy shares her insights on the holiness of hospitality, her personal experiences with food and community, and the challenges of balancing service and advocacy. The conversation also delves into the importance of prayer, community action, and legislative advocacy to end hunger. Nancy provides practical information on how individuals and churches can participate in Bread for the World's initiatives to influence policy and support those in need. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp, and in this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm joined by Nancy Neal. Reverend Nancy Neal is the Minister for Spiritual Formation and Wellness at Bread for the World. She leads an initiative to build a culture at Bread that is grounded in prayer and worship, biblical principles, core values, learning, and wellness. She has led the organizational efforts around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, collaborating with organizations and consultants to train and coach staff and leadership in racial equity principles and practices that have impacted internal culture, policy analysis, organizing strategies, and resource development. Throughout her career, Neal has sought to build bridges across cultures and contribute to repairing brokenness in our society and our institutions. Whether that's working for anti-sweatshop or anti-hunger organizations, advocating for women in the Presbyterian Church, implementing anti-racist, anti-oppression practices, bringing together young clergy across political divides, or even waiting tables. Neal began Bread in 2011, serving in various positions in the former Church Relations Department, including Associate for Denominational Women's Organization Relations, Deputy Director, Interim Director, and Director. She is a minister member of National Capital Presbytery. She has served as parish associate and temporary supply pastor of churches in the greater Washington, D.C. metro area, and currently serves on Leadership Council, Ministry Relations Team, and the board of the Washington, D.C. site of the Presbyterian Church Young Adult Volunteer and Mission Program. She completed her undergraduate studies at Clemson University in South Carolina and earned her Master of Divinity at Union Theological Seminary in New York. So thanks for joining me today, Nancy. Really excited to connect with you and have this conversation.
Great. Thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah. So when you think of your relationship with food, tables, you said you wait tables, like when you think of food and the table, like what's your story?
Yeah. Waiting tables was one of my favorite gigs of all times. I always love to be around people and get to know new people. And there's something just holy, I think, about serving food, particularly as a server. And I grew up in South Carolina in a family that had dinner together every night. We were always required to be at the table unless we were at work. And I grew up in the church, was always sort of the last one to be leaving church. My family was always like, when are you going to be ready to leave? I was always there chit-chatting with everybody. And so this sense of like food and table and community and church and fellowship and communion all just sort of ran together for me growing up. I remember sermons from the pulpit when I was a kid about our neighbors who are really struggling with hunger and poverty, who were having trouble paying bills, getting medical care, having trouble like getting food on their table, and our pastor talking about how we as a church were responsible for caring for our neighbors who were struggling. And those stories like really stuck with me growing up.
What do you find holy about waiting tables? Because my background is in the back of the house as a chef, where I didn't have to deal with unruly customers, and like we would look at some tickets and be like, wait, you want a well done steak and you're going to complain it's dry. Like, so,
Yeah.
so like for me, like, waiting tables, that, there's a special call to that, and what, but I love that you said it, you see it as a holy experience. Like what about it was holy for you?
For me, yeah. I don't know what it is, and maybe it's my growing up in the South, but there's something about hospitality for me that is holy, and a
Mhm.
huge part of that is serving food and
Yeah.
serving others and making sure that people's needs are taken care of. I see it in scripture, when Jesus fed the multitudes, when
Mhm.
Jesus gathered with the disciples at the end of John, when he feeds them breakfast over charcoal fire with fish and bread. And so this idea of caring for one another, just even when you're like at a restaurant and people are kind of snarky and not very nice about the food or whatever, I just still there's something about like just bringing the dish out and serving them that just feels really special that you're providing
Mhm.
for someone in that way. Also, I mean, there's other places to serve. I used to have a monthly potluck here at my house, and I would just invite folks to come together. And I spent most of the time always like just sort of making sure everybody had food and was cared for and stuff. And there's just something very special about that
Mhm.
for me. And that there's just this grace, of like, this way of extending grace, even when people are, annoying or
Yeah.
snarky or complaining or whatever. But to be able to like have conversation, maybe learn their story a little bit, and to
Mhm.
share this food, just was always a bright spot for me.
Do you have a
Um,
specific memory from waiting tables that you're like sort of is, grounded, etched in your memory that like you still recall as you think about hospitality and serving?
there's two memories of like really challenging moments. One is I worked at a coffee shop and I waited tables at lunch, and this homeless person came in, and well, I guess we don't even know if they were homeless, but this person came in that was clearly like disheveled and not ordering anything, and sort of the assumption is they were sort of living on the street. And my boss wanted to kick them out, and I wanted to let them stay. So I just remember this whole conversation and this struggle with like how do you care for your neighbor and also not turn your coffee shop into like a place where you drive away business. How do you
Yeah.
balance the like, okay, we have to make this a like clean, healthy spot for people to come in, and we have to keep business and make money and serve. And then how do we like take care of our neighbors in a
Mm.
dignified manner? And so
Yeah.
those two were really a struggle for me, like holding that tension. And I think that's the tension that I've lived in so often in my life of like, how do we do this? And then one time I did a great job. I waited this table and I got this couple came in, and I felt like I just clicked with them and we had a really great kind of evening together. And then when I got the check, they left me like a $2 tip. And I just
Ah,
remember being like crushed that like we had this lovely evening of like banter and fun, and I was really intentional about bringing them their food and that they enjoyed it and they got everything that they needed, and I've taken such good care of them, and then they left me a $2 tip, and I was like, well, such is life.
yeah.
Good thing I enjoyed this.
Yes. No. I
So,
love that story about like, when you're thinking of this disheveled man and how do we care for our neighbors while also caring for, the flock too. I think there's a
mhm,
correlation, like this tension you said you live in, and I'm sure that tension comes up as you pastor of like, okay, how do I care for and fight for injustice while also ministering and discipling and meeting the
mhm,
needs of a flock. And so like as you think about your life, how is that tension working out? And like, because I'm sure we all feel it of like, okay, I have a family, I need to care for, protect my family, but I also have a call to care for the poor and the needy,
mhm.
and so I think it applies to all of us. And so like help the listeners, help me, like where have you found some clarity in that tension, and how do you still hold it?
hmm I honestly feel like I'm miserable at it. Like, just on Sunday, a woman came in to the church, like at the end of the service, she came in and she didn't have a place to stay. And I'm sort of new to that community in Oxon Hill, and so I didn't know at all what resources to offer her. And we don't have like a pastor's like fund for
Yeah.
things like that because we're such a small church. And we had lunch after church every Sunday, so they packed up a bunch of food and drinks for her and sent her on her way. And I'm like Googling where to send her to like find a shelter and find a space or find somewhere that they could give her money for the night. And um I think, I think we just have to live with the fact that sometimes we're just gonna not get it perfect. And
Mhm.
we're gonna do the best we can and try to be graceful on ourselves and graceful on the other people and figure out what our capacities are and and be clear about what they're not. So um, I don't know that I handled it well, uh, but I think that part of the challenge of living and in this moment of being, and part of the challenge of wellness is how do we live in the space of doing enough.
Mm.
Um, and I think some of the burnout that my colleagues at Bread face um, is trying to figure out what's enough, and we kind of push
Mm.
and drive ourselves to like constantly pay attention to the news and constantly be trying to figure out a strategy, and then in the face of like seeing the big beautiful bill pass and the rescissions pass, and to see that kind of is a loss, and how do we hold that tension and still take care of ourselves and still understand that like we are being faithful to this call, to work to care for our neighbors. How do we, in the local context, like how do we, make sure we're contributing to the food bank and food pantry, and make sure that we're staffing the food pantry in our neighborhood or our community, and holding that tension of like we can't do it all, and there's a bigger power at work that we
Right.
can trust, that God is moving in all of this, and that we just have to keep going and being
Mhm.
faithful while finding that time to like refresh and rebalance and reconnect with our families and with our communities and with ourselves, to do the exercise we need and get the movement and take care of our nutrition and take care of our emotions and let them flow through and not try to like push them off to the sides.
Mm.
It's a hard tension.
It is.
And that's the practice, right? That's a practice. And I think that's a practice in many ways of resistance to the culture that wants us to push to be perfect and to do all the things and to burn ourselves out to gain our sense of worth by being enough, and there's just not ever going to be enough.
No.
So how do we stay in a place of like grace, in a place where we trust that we are created in God's image and likeness, and all of our neighbors are created in God's image and likeness, and hold that inherent dignity? How do we hold that for ourselves and our family and our immediate community, and then for folks even just further out and around the world? Um, if we can ground ourselves there, I think that gives us more capacity to move and do more in the world.
No, for sure. And like, I love that question of what is enough. And because like, I can't answer that question for you. Like, we can be in dialogue and discernment together, and you can't
hmm
answer it for me. But like, I think, discerning together what is enough, and that it
Yeah,
changes over from day to day, maybe week to week, month to month, seasons, like, you
yeah,
know,
for
uh,
sure.
and to then be gentle, like you said, with ourselves, like, and to give ourselves grace, uh,
hmm hmm
is so vital. Um,
hmm
and my wife and the book keeps coming up because, I guess it's applicable today, but my wife and I have been rereading Reaching Out by Henry Nouwen, um,
Mm,
which
I
is
don't think
just,
I've read
oh, you need to, yeah,
it.
add it to your list.
I'm
I,
adding
yeah, not that we all
it.
need more books to read, but like, he talks about the three movements of the spiritual life of, from loneliness to solitude, from
hmm
hostility to hospitality, and then from allusion to prayer, but it's sort of
Oh.
these movements. But like he talks about loneliness and this move from loneliness to solitude, and that like until we're able to be centered in ourselves and alone with ourselves, we can't actually be an advocate for the world. That
Mm-hmm.
like it will all just be striving and but to
Mm-hmm.
be grounded in, like you said, to be grounded in who we are, then allows
Mm-hmm.
us to then reach out,
Mm-hmm.
and create a space, that hospitable space,
Mm-hmm.
where hospitality is more than just setting the table, but that creation of a free space
Yeah.
for others to flourish.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think that it just made me really think about our work at Bread for the World, which is a Christian advocacy organization working to encourage our elected leaders to do what they can to end hunger. And so we invite churches around the country to write letters to Congress and to develop relationships with their members of Congress to be able to influence how they vote on policies related to hunger. And so I think of that when you sort of frame it that way and talk about these movements from loneliness to solitude, hostility to hospitality, illusion to prayer. In some ways, I feel like this work of advocacy is an act of hospitality. It is an act of like ensuring that our neighbors have enough to eat in sort of a broader, bigger scale. Because we just can't food pantry and food bank our way to an end of hunger here in the U.S. And like, there are lots of, we can't sponsor a child, sponsor children, or sponsor our way out of hunger
No.
around the world, and so all of those programs are critical and they're important and they're super important acts of faith of the church. But when we think on a broader scale in the capacity of the federal government with this huge, budget, that just a small portion of it goes to caring for our neighbors and ensuring that our neighbors have enough to eat so that they
Yeah.
too can thrive and flourish.
No, for sure. Because, your podcast is coming on the heels of Jeremy Everett's, and he had this quote that he shared from FDR, who's like, he says, that our policy shouldn't be about what we do for the richest, but what our policy does for the least of these. And I'm paraphrasing it. It's a great quote, but
Mm-hmm.
like, America, and he was basically saying America's at its best when we advocate for the disenfranchised, for
Mm-hmm.
those people under the yoke of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
what Bread for the World is doing. And so, for listeners
Mm-hmm.
who aren't super familiar, can you give us a little background of what
Mm-hmm.
Bread for the World is?
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
you're all about.
Yeah. So we started just 50 years ago. Art Simon was a uh, Lutheran pastor in New York City in the Lower East Side, and they had a food pantry in his church. And he would go out and greet folks every time they hosted it, and he would just find that the need just was continued to be there again and again. And so he kind of got together with some clergy around town, and they thought, well, what can we do to really address the root causes of this hunger that we're seeing in front of us that's just not getting better? And his brother was a member of Congress, and so they were inspired to, leverage their voices to lobby Congress about hunger issues. And so we've been working for 50 years on important program, getting past important legislation around, the resolution about a right to food, that everyone has a right to food. We've worked on WIC and SNAP forever on international assistance. And the way that we operate is that we work with churches around the country to really foster relationships with their members, to to write letters, to build these relationships, and to say, this is important to us in our community, and this is what we see when we go on international mission trips, and this is what we see when we go on local mission trips. This is what we see in our food pantries, and we believe that our faith tells us that it's important to care for our neighbors, and so we would ask you to pass legislation that would care for our neighbors. And sometimes we get a lot done, and sometimes we're in sort of defense mode. And right now we're a little bit more in defense mode and trying to protect the programs that have been around for many, many decades. And the work has been largely bipartisan for a long time, although it's gotten a lot more politicized in recent decades, probably. I joined Brett in 2011, and I think we just started to see a little bit before that, just a really deep politicization of programs. There was a lot of alignment on in past decades, like SNAP and WIC and international assistance. Were always programs that got bipartisan support.
No, I appreciate that, and it's cool. 50 years, like that's that's a testimony. Testament to the work, and to what you guys are about. And why do you feel like? Because I've heard it said in some Christian circles where, like, oh, if the church just stepped up and did its part, we don't need, we wouldn't need the government to advocate, for this. Like, why? But what? Other people have pointed out that food is a political issue, and so, like, why do churches need to advocate, and their local leaders and their national leaders to fight for this?
Yeah, I think it's a capacity issue, honestly. We used to have this graphic that showed like how many, if you looked at all the food assistance through federal government and local food pantries and food banks and all the stuff, and the graphic was like a set of 10 grocery bags, and of them, something like 8 or 9 came from federal sources. And so the capacity there in these programs is just greater than, like, the churches can't handle that. There's just no way that the churches can handle it. We just can't fill those gaps. Even, and we've seen the church get smaller in recent decades, and that churches are strained, and my little church is struggling. We send $1,000 to the food pantry every year, and we collect donations regularly and take them over. But I just recently heard that 50% of Prince George's County residents are at risk of food insecurity, and that's just outside of Washington, D.C., and a lot of that is related to the layoffs from the federal government. And so you have 50% of your county at risk of food insecurity. I mean, the food pantries are really strained. Our food pantry was serving about 80 people a week. They've been up to 100, 120, and they want to add a second day in the week to be able to, actually it's once a month, and then they want to add a second day in the month to try to address the growing need with. So it's a huge challenge that the church just literally doesn't have capacity.
No. Yeah, and like the 50% of this county just outside of Washington, D.C., that's has the potential for food insecurity, like that's insane. Like, and I've heard I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona, and have talked to our local food bank, and they've seen sort of an exponential rise in the amount of people they're serving, and even before COVID and since COVID, like it's not gotten any easier or better, and so they're, but they're also realizing that being a food bank's not enough, and so how do we, get to the root causes, and how do we actually work towards alleviating hunger, is part of the importance, and Bread for the World's tagline, we can end hunger in our time, which that's a, I think, was it, Jim Collins used to say, like, it's a big audacious goal or whatever, a big hairy audacious goal, the book, that I remember, but like, so that's a big goal. Like, what gives you hope, maybe personally, but also, as the organization Bread for the World, that this is a solvable issue?
Well, I believe it's solvable but the challenge is that we don't have the political will to solve it.
Right.
And because we produce enough food on the planet to feed everybody.
Yeah.
We have the capacity to do it. We just don't have the political will to do it. One of the most important one thing that happened during the pandemic is that the child tax credit was made to be was distributed monthly instead of
Yeah.
like as a one large lump sum at the end of the year. And that, like 45% of children who were in poverty were moved out of poverty for that time. Like
Wow.
they found that families spent that money on groceries, and that it really sustained people and moved people from like being at risk to hunger to not being hungry. And so there are programs like that, like this tax credit, that could significantly improve the people's quality of life and give children access to food to be able to thrive in school and do better in school. To invest, really, that it's an investment in our future
Yeah.
by providing these programs. It's an investment in our future by providing support internationally to these programs. And so because we've seen so much success, and we've seen since the 1990s such an increase, such a reduction in poverty, an increase in access to food, we know that it's possible to get there. We've had setbacks with the pandemic and with decisions that Congress has made, and but we know that it is possible.
Yeah.
Scientifically.
Yeah. Is that tax credit, that child tax credit monthly payments, are those still happening, or was that rescinded? Like
No,
what came of
yeah.
what came of that?
Yeah, it happened. It expired.
Okay.
The program expired, and it went back to the lump sum. And then
Right.
in the recent bill, the who qualifies for it has been reduced, and so fewer people have access to either the full amount or the amount at all.
Wow. Like, but there was evidence that this moved and helped society and moved families from food insecurity to maybe food security. Like, but we don't want to continue that. Like what? Like,
Yeah.
why stay hopeful then? Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. I mean, that's such a good question. I am a sucker, and I believe it's possible for people to change. This is me
yeah,
personally. Like, I
yeah,
really believe that, that God can change hearts.
right,
It is heartbreaking to see when it doesn't happen, but I do believe that change is possible, and I believe that God has something better in store for us in this world, and that we are not in charge of the outcomes. We're in charge of taking the actions that we're called to take. And so, we see this vision, we see the possibility of the world. We've seen, our elders have seen this, you know, this transition that's happened since the 90s. And in they established the Millennium Development Goals in the year 2000 to try to assess how do you measure the effect of development so that it is like having a positive impact on people's lives. And they set out for these Millennium Development Goals, and in 2015 they passed the Sustainable Development Goals that take us to 2030. And when they lined out those Sustainable Development Goals, ending hunger is one of them.
mm,
Um, and so based on the research, we can really be able to do it. And we know that, in scriptures we see Jesus feeding people all over the
yeah,
place, and we know that that's what God wants and that's what God longs for. And I think we can pray and we can take action. We can use our voices to speak up, to end hunger. And part of that is by calling our members of Congress and telling them that it's important to us, because members of Congress listen to their constituents, because those are the people that elect them. And sometimes it maybe feels like they aren't listening and they're not doing what we're asking them to do. That's why we got to call all of our friends, and we have to have all of us together collectively, reaching out to our members of Congress and telling them what's really important, and finding those like big donors and the influential people and bringing them along and building relationships to build the power to have that influence in
Yeah.
our system.
No, and it is a, collective work that we all have to engage in,
Hmm.
not all of us are called to advocate for hunger,
Hmm.
we all have different passions and in
Hmm.
line with how God created us to be, but like even ending hunger, like it's going to take multiple organizations, everybody working together collectively to figure out how do
Hmm.
we do this,
Yeah.
and yeah, no one organization can do it by themselves.
Yeah.
But
That's true.
Bread for the World has, you on your website, you have these letter writing campaigns or
Hmm.
processes, like you have resources available to help people. Like what are
Yeah.
those resources? Like, help us, because, I think a lot of us are realizing we can advocate in some small way. And so, but
Hmm.
even just a script to help goes a long
Yeah,
way.
for sure. I'll share two things that I think are really helpful. One is that prayer is super important. We believe in prayer because we're Christian, and prayer is foundational for us at Bread
Yeah.
for the World. And so we have an email subscription you can get every 2 weeks or so that called Prayers to End Hunger, and you can join us in prayer.
Hmm.
And our staff gathers every Monday. We just this afternoon at noon Eastern time gathered online and gathered for prayer together. So we start our week as a staff in
Hmm.
prayer. So prayer is super important. I think we're all praying in the same direction about ending hunger. We have more capacity to make that change. The other thing that we do is we invite churches and individuals to write letters. And so if you go to our website, you can learn about the offering of letters. And we see this using our voice as an offering to God, as a spiritual practice of articulating what we believe, why this is important to our faith, and how we want to care for our neighbors. And so you can visit our website and you can just write a letter yourself if you want to just take action. Or you can gather your community together, whether that's your church or your book group or your spin class or whatever. You can gather together and write letters to your member of Congress together. And we always encourage people to pray over those letters, even if you write them electronically, to send them and then just do a little prayer over all the letters
Hmm.
to just to give God thanks for having the voice and for having the capacity to write, and for giving us these tools to write, to be able to join together collectively. There's something just powerful in gathering and doing this together. And I think, part of the challenge of this moment is that we can be so separated and pulled in so many different directions. And one of the things that sustains us and gives us hope and sort of protects us from cynicism is being together and gathering together. And so coming together to write these letters, coming together
Hmm.
to pray, is an important tool in making this work sustainable.
No, for
Um,
sure.
if you want our website, it's bread.org
Okay.
/pray will get you to the prayers, and then bread.org /OL for offering of letters will get you to the offering of letters page.
Yep. And we'll make
We
sure
can
that those
post.
are in the show notes. So people, if you're interested, please look at the show
Yeah,
notes. Those websites will be there. So you can just click right there. But
yeah.
yeah, no, the help and you mentioned, coming together and doing it as a community just helps guard against cynicism. And,
Hmm.
I think many of us can feel alone or like I'm the only one that cares. But
Hmm.
even, shortly after the election, I emailed, the pastor of the church I was at, and I was like, hey, have you heard of any other people that are worried about, the state of politics or just, worried about what is happening? And he gave
Hmm.
me a list of names, and we get together maybe once a month just to check in with each other.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so great. Yeah.
and it's just sort of, both like, hey, this is what's happening in Flagstaff. Like, you know, um, but also like, hey, how's your soul? Like, how are you staying engaged?
Hmm.
And it's been really helpful, like just to
Hmm.
have that group. And, one, it helps me stay engaged.
Hmm.
But then also knows, okay, I have these people that I can rely on,
Hmm.
and we're not all passionate about the same, but we're, just like you said, the community aspect is so vital uh,
Hmm.
during this time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think and in my role of Minister for Spiritual Formation and Wellness, I always have a mouthful of a title,
Yeah.
it seems, at Fred. Um, but I think that's part of what we're trying to do, both for our staff to find ways like the pandemic just was such a hard time because we were all so far away and we were doing this really hard work and like
Yeah.
in the weeds on this. And when the new administration came in, there was so much activity going on and people were just pushing, pushing, pushing. And we were like, okay, how do we help people realize this is a marathon and not a sprint? That this
Right.
is like, we kind of keep going, but we also have to take breaks and rest and care for ourselves and care for one another. Um, we did a little question with staff about like, well, how did you feel cared for in any places where you worked? And people just said, when my colleagues remembered important things about me or checked in on me
Hmm.
or offered to help do a thing. And I just thought, it's not hard. We can check in on our neighbors and we can check
Yeah.
in on our friends and we can offer to help when they're clearly struggling and it just seems like so simple, an answer, that coming together in community in this time where we just are so pulled in so many different directions and, on our screens all day
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
Um,
The doom scroll is not a good wellness activity for any
it's
of us.
not. No, and I catch myself doing it. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? I
Yeah.
used to be like, I used to watch too much television and I watched less television. I was like, yay, I watch less television. I was like, no, I'm doom scrolling like through I'm just on my phone instead of
Yeah.
a big screen. So, yeah.
So for Nancy, like, how does your care for your soul look like? Like, what
Yeah.
have you found restorative? You've been with Bread for the World now for almost 15 years. So like
Hard to believe.
yeah. So how have you maintained hope, and what practices sustain
Mhm,
you?
mhm. Yeah. I always really struggled with trying to keep a regular daily practice of anything. And I was part of a group, and we developed these rules of life. And as I had developed this rule of life, and my friends were like, "That doesn't sound like you." And I was like, "Daily this, daily that, monthly this," and they're like, "That doesn't sound like you at all." And so I finally had to just kind of figure out, where did I find God in the things that I do during the day? Like,
Hmm.
what are the places, and to just do those things more.
Yeah.
And so I found that like walking through my neighborhood park, Oxen Run Park, I found that was really meaningful for me. And so I started practicing that pretty regularly. I'm not as good about that right now, but I found that exercise was really meaningful for me, and that I just really enjoyed it. And so just trying to lean into that. And one of the things I learned during the pandemic is just stare out the window. Like,
Yeah.
watch the trees and the birds and the, like, whatever is happening, just stare out the window. And so these practices, my current practice is to move slowly in the mornings, and I try to
Hmm.
journal, read a little bit and journal, and drink my coffee and just move slowly to just give myself a little ease and space to start my day. And then
Yeah.
I find that my day is less insane when I do
Hmm.
that. And so just trying to connect with God, connect with myself, you know, pet my cats,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
important. And then as a preacher, honestly, I find preaching like it's work. It's a lot of work to do, but just the engagement with scripture and the regular writing is just really helpful for me in terms of a spiritual practice, and
Hmm.
like just the insights that I gain from scripture, as I'm praying about what I'm going to say on Sunday morning. It's just been really a helpful practice. I also have a therapist, which I'm a spiritual director. So I highly recommend
Yep.
those
Yes.
practices to like ground us. And I've found really great people to accompany me in this journey, and so that
Yeah.
those have been really incredibly meaningful for me.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. Just, because again, not every practice works the same for people, but to hear what is working, and what restores your soul can be helpful
Yeah.
to us as we figure out, okay, where, like just your question of where did I find God and what I did today? Like where did I find a
Hmm.
little, where my shoulders relaxed a little, maybe even, and,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think for me, sometimes like we have like a little, it's called the duck pond just because there's ducks, but like I've sometimes found like after I drop my kids off at the bus or like just to walk around that pond with my pour over coffee just to like
Uh-huh.
I can see some mountains, like is just a like you said, it slows me down a little bit, just like okay, you know
Yeah.
before I tackle what's ahead, like I'm just gonna walk.
Yeah.
uh you
It
know
sounds very relaxing.
yeah.
Ducks and mountains and water and coffee, like all of my
Yeah,
favorite.
no, we're fortunate to live in a beautiful place in a forest, and so
Uh-huh.
you realize that's not available to everyone, but
Yeah.
it's but like you said, even just looking outside, like I think there's been studies that have
Uh-huh.
shown just even having a window to the outside and being
Uh-huh.
able to look outside can be a restorative practice.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and
Well, my neighborhood is, I like to say that my park is where like share bikes and scooters
yeah,
um come to die. And so I say that because it's not the prettiest kind of cleanest park.
right,
And my practice is really to like find the little places of beauty
yeah,
in my walk, because it's a little junky sometimes. And so just the water is really high today, or these beautiful little flowers. And sometimes I just take pictures to like
hmm,
capture these like little small spaces of beauty. And so I think anywhere, even if we don't have the like beautiful trees or the beautiful mountains, or there's beauty in like every space, and trying to find that as we move through,
right.
and that slowing down and being really present in this moment, I think is what that is. Yeah. I love there's a Thich Nhat Hanh book. I'm looking at my bookshelves over here.
Yeah.
Um, and I can't remember what it's called. I don't even know if I can find it, but he talks about the challenge of this father to find time for himself during the day. And he was talking about, I have to be with my kid and I have to work and I have to run around. I have all these things to do. And he basically was like, every moment is your moment, whether it's doing something for
Hmm.
someone else or doing something for yourself. Each moment that you have in life is your time. And if you show up and are present, even when you're having to do all these other things, being present in this like one moment can relieve that feeling of like, I'm doing all these things for other people and never, but being present is somehow helpful
Yeah.
in, in making our time ours. That every moment is
Hmm.
our time, no matter what we're doing. And
Hmm.
I found that super helpful to just, you know,
Yeah.
just figure out how to be present in each moment.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I love that. Yeah. Just because like you said, we may not have 3 hours to spend contemplating, you know, but we can
right.
be present, right? Like I can be present with my girls tonight, when they come back, and
Uh-huh.
find a little joy.
Hmm.
But that does require again a groundedness. And I think it goes back to
Hmm.
even saying like, okay, what is enough? Like what is my capacity today?
Hmm.
Um, and
Hmm.
to be graceful and gentle with ourselves.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
to switch gears a little, I'm curious, like, because this is super helpful, but then what issues are we seeing related to hunger that like listeners should be aware of that like,
Hmm.
the big beautiful bill, I don't know if we would call it beautiful, passed,
Right. Uh,
but we're going to see new challenges. Like what are the issues surrounding hunger that we are
hmm.
currently facing that listeners can just be
Hmm.
made aware of,
Hmm.
to think through?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're really looking to, we're kind of looking at a lot of things right now.
Yeah.
One of those things is WIC, and there's a bill that's about improving WIC. WIC is the Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children. It provides nutrition assistance for women who are pregnant through the children's 5th birthday. And so what they're trying to do to make that process easier is to be able to do televisits with doctors to get some of the
Oh,
approvals and things
yeah.
moved along. When you don't have a lot of money and you maybe don't have a car and you have to take off work to go to the doctor, it makes it really challenging. And so
Mm.
being able to do some of those by video is a really helpful tool. And so we're kind of pushing for the improvement. I think it's the WIC Modernization Act.
Okay.
We're working on the farm bill. It continues to be an important bill, and so there's a skinny farm bill coming through that may or may not move through and get passed. The farm bill is a huge piece of legislation that gets reauthorized every 7 years, and so we are about 2, maybe 3 years behind. Some of that work
Mm.
got done in the big beautiful bill, the reconciliation bill, and so some of the funding got cut and the levels got cut for SNAP. But some of the other programs we're watching there. So, we're just trying to look at legislation from the lenses of sustainability and equity and nutrition, and trying to focus in those ways. And I think, just trying to protect global nutrition programs of what we have left uh, in the what are those bills? Sorry, I'm blanking all of a sudden. Um, in the budget bills. So watching the budget and how the
Mm.
budget is panning out, and just paying attention to funding levels for WIC and SNAP and international nutrition programs in particular.
Where can we find information so we don't have to call
Uh-huh.
through millions of pages of bills that, you
Oh,
know?
yes, go to our website. Yeah. So right now we're asking our senators and representatives to fully fund and strengthen the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, WIC, and to
Hmm.
protect and provide robust funding for food aid and global nutrition programs. So I got it
Okay.
right.
Yes, you did.
So, but to find that, if you go to our website, bread.org/act, but if you
Okay.
just click on ACT on the front page,
Yeah.
bread.org, it will take you to the capacity to a place where you can write a letter. And it
Okay.
will provide some text. And what I want to encourage folks to do is to like personalize the letters, because when members of Congress get form letters that come from everybody, they pay less attention. So if you say where you live in your district, if you say what church you belong to, if you say why this is really important to you, and like customize the letters, you can do it on the website. You can customize it right there. It will go to
Wow,
your senators and your representative, and it will send it all at once to all 3 of them for you. So you would send the same letter to all of
that's
them.
awesome. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, I think in so much instances, it's like you don't know where to start. And so what I really appreciate about what you guys are doing at Bread is you're giving clear, concise information with calls to action and making it maybe not easy, but easier for people to
Mhm.
engage, and but then also to take time to learn from your local food bank. Like I,
Mhm.
was able to sit with the director of our food bank, and just to hear their struggles and what they're up against. Like, learning, like you said, learning the local issues is super
Mhm.
important too.
Mhm.
Because I think sometimes there can be a great, you can impact your local area, um, you know,
Right. Yeah.
in some key ways.
One of the things I love about Bread, if you go to our website, bread.org/OL, it tells you it gives you step-by-step instructions about organizing letter writing for a group.
Wow.
The other thing is we have organizers positioned around the country
Yeah.
who can help. So there's a list of people that you could call on to get help. on the Offering of Letters website or just our regular website. So if you
Yep.
need, guidance, or you need someone to walk you through this, if this is new, you know, we have staff. And then we also do these quarterly webinars. So
Okay.
if you're kind of trying to figure out how to dip your toes in, you can join, and they're by region. And there's a couple states that have them where we have some targeted work, because those are important states to our legislation. But you can just join one of those calls. You can learn what's happening and what to do. You can meet your organizer.
Uh,
And so it's a great tool for just like finding other people that are doing this and finding
yeah.
some community around this, because it can be overwhelming to do. And it can be a little daunting to try to figure out. Before I was on staff at Bread, I was at a church in Brooklyn trying to figure out how to organize an offering of letters with my church. And,
Yeah.
so I understand how daunting it can be. So
That
we are here to help.
that's awesome. Really appreciate it. Yeah. And
Hmm.
again, yeah, check out their website, and again, we'll put all these links in the, show notes, so that
Hmm.
they're there and you don't have to remember them. Because I listen to podcasts working out or driving and don't have time to
Right.
click, a link. But,
Right. Yeah.
um,
I'll
but
just say one other thing, or two more
yeah,
things
yes.
about this. One is that you have more impact when you are connected with other people doing this. And
Mm,
so when you write as a church group, you're going to have more impact. When you're joining a group like Bread for the World, where other people around the country are also writing similar letters, you have a greater impact. And the other thing is we have lobbyists, like registered lobbyists on staff, who are up
wow.
on Capitol Hill all the time. And so if you let us know that you've written letters, then our staff can say, hey, when they go to a member of Congress, they can say, we know that these folks at this church wrote letters to you about this issue, and we want to check in, make sure you don't have any questions, and see how we can support you in learning more about the issue. Obviously, telling them we want them to vote
Right.
for one thing or the other, or whatever. And then we also work in partnership with lots of denominations and churches around the
Yeah.
country. And so we are in coalitions, interfaith coalitions here in DC, where we're kind of pulling together with a lot of other groups. So we do not do any of this work in isolation. We're not like just off on our own. We're collaborating all
Yeah.
the time so that we can have the largest umbrella and the biggest impact that we possibly can. And so that's a really important part of that work. And so you can trust that we're not just out here leading people astray. We're really working with lots of other church folks
No.
around to do this work together. So it's always when we win, it's a collective win.
Yep. No. Yeah. I just love the big umbrella, that place,
Hmm.
that this is, y- you know, across party lines, across denominational
Hmm.
lines, like, you know, um,
Hmm.
food should be an issue that we can rally. Ending
Hmm.
hunger should be an issue that should unite people, because I don't think people want to see kids go hungry. Like, I just,
No.
that's a core belief of hope, that, like, people want kids to be fed and well nourished and succeed in
Yeah.
life. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so, yeah, what you guys are doing, really, really appreciate it. And it's been fun getting to know the organization a little better,
Yeah.
and to see, like, oh, okay, like, hey, here's what we can do, and how to be
Hmm.
part of it, in
Hmm.
tangible, easy, step-by-step ways.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so some questions I use to wrap up. What's the story you want the church to tell?
Oh, that's a great question. Story I want the church to tell. I want the church to tell people that God loves them
Hmm.
and that God longs for their thriving and their living into their full potential.
Hmm.
And that I want the church to tell that story to our elected leaders and urge them to, do as God calls them, to take care of those who are most vulnerable and pushed to the margins of our society, who struggle with hunger and poverty and um, getting access to medicine and medical care um, and to the education and dignity that all people deserve.
I love it. Uh, I love hearing people's unique answers, but the theme of the love of God just always keeps coming back, and how it plays it out and your take. It's just I love it.
I love that too.
And so some fun food questions to wrap up,
Okay.
to end on a little lighter note. What's one
Yeah.
food you refuse to eat?
Oh gosh. I don't know if there's a food I refuse to eat. I'm not a huge fan of eggplant. And it's really, I don't like slimy things. Anything
Yeah.
slimy is a big no.
Okay. That's fair. Yes. Gotcha. No, I enjoy eggplant. I enjoy it in the Chinese method. Like they have it's called eggplant and fish sauce, but there's no fish in it. But I forget but like that way of preparation was always good.
Okay. Is it fried?
It's not fried; it's stir fried. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Give it to me cooked well.
yeah, that's fair. Yes, I think my philosophy as a cook and my grounding belief is that actually people will love vegetables if they learn how to prepare them well.
Yeah.
But people hate vegetables because they were either canned or cooked till mushy, or they just weren't treated with the respect.
I had like something like string beans at prom dinner, and I was like, oh, I don't really know. And I ate them, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are so good. And I was like, that's because they're not from a can, and someone prepared them beautifully at this fancy downtown Charleston restaurant.
Yep.
So,
yep. On the other end, what's one of the best things you've ever eaten?
Oh my gosh, I love food so much. I've eaten so many good things, and my brother's a chef, and like a really fancy chef in New York City, and I've had some incredible food. I'll tell you my favorite food though, like my favorite like kind of food, and that's Ethiopian food. I don't know why, but like just there's something beautiful about like eating food with your hands that is just tasty and yummy, and the bread and all the things, and like a nice platter of Ethiopian food.
Yeah. And they serve it with like, it's a bread, but it's a tortilla. It looks like a tortilla, like,
yeah, I
right?
forgot what it's called. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a spongy, flat, like it has a little almost sourdough flavor to it.
Yeah.
And injera, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
So good.
Mm-hmm. There was a great Ethiopian restaurant in Salt Lake City when we used to live in Utah. That was it was so fun to go to because, like you said, you get a big platter. Everybody's eating with that, the bread and it's just so fun.
It's because it's family style, right? You get the platter that you share with the whole table, and you're like dipping the bread or like grabbing the food with the bread as your utensil. And I love family style. Just love family style like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And finally, there's a conversation among chefs about last meals, as in if you knew you only had one last meal to enjoy, what would be on your table? And so if Nancy had one last meal to enjoy, would it be an Ethiopian feast or would there be something else on that table?
Oh my gosh. I can't even. I don't know. It could be pizza. I don't know. It could be. I've been making this like gnocchi dish with sausage and like a cream sauce and some broccoli. And that could be my last dish. I don't know. I think I'll tell you who I want to make my last dish, and that would be my brother.
That's fair. Yes. Just give him carte blanche and be like, hey, feed me,
Feed me my last meal, and whatever you come up with, it's going to be perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
That is the best way to eat, is when you can give a chef, just say, hey, give us the food you want to prepare, and I don't want to see a menu. I just want to enjoy.
Oh gosh, that's my favorite. My favorite. Yeah. And I've had plenty of meals like that with my brother.
I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of the perks of being in the industry.
Right. Yes, it is. It is.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Nancy, I've really enjoyed this. If people want to, obviously we'll put Bread for the World info to connect with Bread for the World. If they want to connect, is there a way to connect with you? If people want to find out more about Nancy, is there a way to connect with you? Or is Bread for the World the best place to send them?
They can come to Bread. I'm on Instagram at nancy.ellen and on Facebook. I don't know what my thing is, Nancy Neal on Facebook. I think my stuff is all private, so you have to friend me.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe I should open it up if
Yeah.
folks want. But yeah. Yeah. I'm also
Oh,
at Southminster Presbyterian Church. If you're in Maryland in the DMV area, I'm at Oxon Hill on Sunday
okay.
morning. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Nancy, appreciate this. Really appreciate seeing your heart, your passion, but also hearing about what Bread for the World's doing in this time. Yeah, thank you for the time.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for having me. It's been really fun to chit chat with you here and be part of your podcast. Great.
Appreciate it. Yeah. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with others. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until next time, bye.